Chapter 1. Cannon Fires Dawn. The sky over Candia was not yet awake when the first cannonball tore through the dawn. It came from the Ottoman lines, a black streak against the pale horizon, and struck the city's outer wall with a sound like God himself had coughed. The impact sent a shudder through the stones, through the earth, through the bones of the men who slept too close to the ramparts, and then silence, a breath held, a heartbeat suspended, then the next shot, and the next. The bombardment began before the sun had fully risen, as if the Ottomans had timed their assault to catch the city in that liminal hour between night and day, when the mind was still half dreaming, when the body was slow to react. The Venetians, though, were not slow. They had been waiting. They had known this day would come. Captain Alessandro Morosini stood on the battlements, his breath misting in the cold air, his fingers tightening around the hilt of his sword. He had been awake for hours, pacing the length of the wall, listening to the distant murmurs of the enemy camp, the scrape of shovels against earth as they dug their trenches closer, closer. He had seen the lanterns bobbing in the dark, the flicker of torches as the Ottoman guns were wheeled into position. He had counted the seconds between each shot, measuring the rhythm of the siege to come, and now it had begun. The city groaned beneath the onslaught. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling of the watchtower where Alessandro stood, and he could feel the vibrations in his boots, the way the stones trembled beneath his feet. He had been in battles before, had fought in the Adriatic, had seen the flash of musket fire and the spray of blood, but this was different. This was not a skirmish. This was not a raid. This was a siege. A slow, relentless, grinding war of attrition, and it would not be over quickly. He turned his head as a shadow moved beside him, a young soldier, barely more than a boy, his face pale in the dim light, his hands shaking as he clutched his musket. Alessandro recognized him, Lorenzo, the son of a baker from Venice, sent to fight for the Republic before he had even grown into his own body. Steady, Alessandro said, his voice low. Breathe. The boy swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. They're going to break through, aren't they? Alessandro did not answer. He did not lie. Instead, he turned back to the horizon, where the first light of dawn was bleeding into the sky, painting the clouds in hues of red and gold. It was beautiful, in a way, the way the light caught the smoke from the cannons, the way it turned the destruction into something almost sacred, as if God himself were watching, and this was his judgment. And then he saw her, a woman standing in the street below, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her dress stained with soot and dust. She was not running. She was not screaming. She was simply standing there, her head tilted back, her eyes fixed on the sky, as if she were waiting for something. Alessandro did not know her name. He had seen her before, though had seen her moving through the city, her hands busy with tasks he could not name. She was Greek, he thought, one of the locals, caught in the crossfire of empires. And she was beautiful. He barked orders, his voice cutting through the din of battle, his sword flashing as he cut down those who dared to climb the walls. He fought with a cold precision, a calculated brutality, as if he were not a man at all, but a force of nature, a storm-given flesh. And yet, even as he fought, his mind was elsewhere. He thought of the woman in the street. He thought of the way her eyes had met his, the way she had stood there unbroken in the face of the storm. He thought of the way she had looked at him, as if she knew something he did not. And he wondered if she was still alive. The day wore on, the sun climbing higher in the sky, the heat growing more oppressive with each passing hour. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and blood, the taste of it bitter on the tongue. The Venetians fought on, their bodies aching, their muscles burning, their spirits unbroken. And then, as the sun began to set, the Ottomans withdrew. The bombardment ceased. The musket fire faded. The silence that followed was almost worse than the noise, a hollow echoing thing that seemed to stretch on forever. Alessandro stood on the battlements, his sword still in his hand, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked out over the battlefield, at the bodies strewn across the earth, at the smoke rising from the ruins of the city. He looked at the Ottoman lines, where the enemy soldiers were already beginning to dig in to prepare for the next assault. And he knew that this was only the beginning. He turned away, his boots crunching on the broken stones, his mind already racing ahead to the next battle, the next day, the next week. He had to plan. He had to strategize. He had to make sure that when the Ottomans came again, the Venetians would be ready. But as he walked, his thoughts returned to her. The woman in the street, the one who had stood there unbroken in the face of the storm. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. He did not know if he would ever see her again. But he knew one thing. He would find her. And when he did, he would ask her name. And he would ask her to stay. And he would ask her to fight. 'Cause in the end, that was all any of them could do. Fight and hope. and love, and wait for the dawn. The first day of the siege was over, but the war had only just begun.